Welcome back to another video with the Sexperts. I'm Michaela, and today's topic is sexuality. We will explore the intersections of sexuality with the holistic model, Circles of Sexuality, created by Dennis Daly in 1981. And just a quick reminder to click on the notifications button next to the subscribe button so you can keep up with any new videos that we release. What is sexuality? We know that it's holistic and it's complex. So think in terms of body image, gender, your sexual health, power, sensual pleasure, relationships, intimacy. According to the World Health Organization, a central aspect of being human throughout life encompasses sex, gender identities and roles, sexual orientation, eroticism, pleasure, intimacy, and reproduction. Sexuality is experienced and expressed in thoughts, fantasies, desires, beliefs, attitudes, values, behaviors, practices, roles, and relationships. While sexuality can include all of these dimensions, not all of them are always experienced or expressed. And sexuality is influenced by the interaction of biological, psychological, social, economic, political, cultural, legal, historical, religious, and spiritual factors. The holistic model, Circles of Sexuality, is an excellent way of representing how all aspects of sexuality are interconnected. This model includes power and agency, sensuality, intimacy, sexual orientation and gender identity, sexual and reproductive health, and sexual behaviors and practices. Let's begin with power and agency. Power and agency lie in the middle of the circle. This is because they both influence and connect to all the other circles and therefore all other aspects of sexuality. In addition to sexuality, your self-worth, your understanding of sexual preferences, and values are also influenced by power and agency. They both address one's ability to influence and exercise control over others. We each have our own level of power and agency depending on our income, race, gender, ability. So these are influenced by social, political, and environmental circumstances. They can be used both positively and negatively, stemming anywhere from everyday issues to legal concerns. Here you can think of power and agency as seeking and giving consent, saying yes or no to sexual requests, or actively taking care of one's sexual health. So in order to truly understand power and agency, we must discuss them separately. Power is one's ability to act upon and influence others. This represents someone who has the capacity to do something with strength or force to exercise control over ourselves and others. Agency is one's capacity to act independently and to make one's own choices. This is what a person has the right, ability, or power to do based on sociological and philosophical ideas. Power and agency work together in every aspect of your sexuality, and with great power comes great responsibility. This can be even coming out to friends and family. However, an individual may abuse their power or agency to manipulate, control, or harm others in sexual experiences such as rape, sexual emotional abuse, or harassment. So how can we use it in sexually and emotionally healthy ways? We can use them to care for ourselves, seek out mutual pleasure and well-being, and act from a secure emotional place where we give ourselves and others high value and worth. So my question is, what will you do with your power and agency? How do you want others to be affected by your power and agency? And how do you want to be affected by others' power and agency? Maybe you'll ask someone on a date, or you'll decide to get tested. As we move forward, we will continue learning how power and agency both interact with the remaining circles of sexuality. Getting into our outer circle, we will first discuss sensuality. Sensuality is the physiological and psychological pleasure from one's own body and the body of others. This involves our awareness of our physical senses, how we feel in our body, and our experiences of those senses. Your sensuality is connected to your body image, and it enables us to feel good about how our bodies look and feel. We should feel empowered when recognizing what our bodies can do. It's about sharing your body with others, not just with sex. For example, many people find touch pleasurable and many do not. For others, sensuality can bring up anxiety, stress, or even memories of trauma. And since I mentioned that power and agency are connected to all of the other circles, I'm going to provide an example of power and agency for each of the circles. So here's how power and agency can be reflected in sensuality. After watching a TV show in which sex toys are mentioned, which is the power, a person decides to get one for themselves, and that's agency. Some questions that youth or other individuals may have regarding sensuality is, how can I make sex pleasurable for myself and my partner? And how can I feel good in my body? Next, we will discuss intimacy, which is the ability to be close with others. This is a replacement word for sex, and it involves the desire to experience and return emotional and/or physical closeness with others. Examples of intimacy include cuddling, sharing stories and lives, caring, listening, supporting, spending time together, using sex toys, and it's also about using sex to explore and experience intimacy. Remember that sometimes sex isn't about intimacy, and sexual behavior is not always intimate. People experience different levels of intimacy, and these levels will change depending on the situation. Even within the same situation, if two people are having sex, they are both having two completely different experiences. So what is intimate to one may not be to another. Ultimately, intimacy is where we are looking or hoping to share an experience in which we are close to someone else in some way. And an example of power and agency in intimacy may be, in an intimate relationship, a person may abuse their power to share a photo of another person's body on social media without their consent. However, another person can use their agency to gain the courage to ask a good friend on a date because they notice their feelings have changed. Some questions regarding intimacy may be confusion about what intimacy looks like. Maybe I'm afraid I won't know how to make intimate connections with others, or that others won't want to share intimacy with me. This is where we start to develop self-love, which we will explore in a future video. And this is important for individuals who accept mistreatment as preferable to loneliness. So we not only want to have healthy relationships with others, but ourselves as well. Avoiding loneliness can include becoming intimate with oneself through, again, self-love, self-worth, and acceptance. Moving on, sexual identity is defined as who we are attracted to physically and/or romantically. This includes your sexual orientation and gender identity, and can be influenced by biases, stereotypes, and fears. Let's review what we learned from the gender unicorn in our last video. Gender identity is a person's inner feeling, sense, or understanding of who they are, related to their gender. So this is being a man, woman, transgender, non-binary, gender fluid, etc. Gender has nothing to do with body type, and it may or may not match your sex assigned at birth. Gender identity is often known from early childhood and can change over time. Sexual orientation plays a larger role in sexuality. This refers to a person's physical, romantic, and/or emotional attraction towards other people. Examples of sexual orientation include straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, asexual, pansexual. Most people often define themselves in terms of heterosexuality to identify those who are attracted to individuals of a different sex from themselves, and homosexuality to identify those who are attracted to the individuals of the same sex from themselves. This does not necessarily describe sexual behavior or the gender of one's partner or partners. Sexual orientation is comprised of three elements: sexual attraction, sexual behavior, and sexual identity. These elements help individuals express that part of themselves and what parts of gender that plays in sexual feelings and desires that they experience, want, or are a part of with other people. Sexual orientation and gender identity are separate and distinct. When discussing power and agency in the role of sexual identity, an example of power would be a supportive adult that ensures school policies are in place to protect a young person's rights to use the bathroom of their gender identity. And an example of agency could be a young person that comes out to an adult that they trust that they identify as genderqueer. So some have experienced, observed, or participated in harassment and violence based on a person's sexual orientation or their gender identity. This could lead to questions about one's own identities and ultimately cause a fear of consequences of coming out. The fear of shame is usually based on family or community attitudes. So make sure that you have someone that's either a parent, friends, or other family members, other community members that you can talk to about your sexuality. And remember that you can always contact the Sexperts with any questions or concerns you may have. The next circle covers sexual health and reproduction. This is our capacity or ability or lack of to reproduce. This also includes feelings and experiences with reproduction. and behaviors and attitudes about sex and reproduction. This includes your experience of sexual wellness and illness. It's important that you have a doctor that you trust and have a good relationship with. This will help to ensure that you are getting medically accurate and body-positive information. It's also important to be receiving hormone-related care, such as gender-affirming hormone therapy. Other topics you should have understanding of is sexual anatomy, reproduction, contraception, sexual activities, sexual decision-making, STI prevention, and even self-care. These services are very important, in which they can help you figure out whether you're fertile or infertile. It can help you with pregnancy and post-pregnancy care, and then even things as simple as regular exams in areas such as trans care and access to other medical care. And of course, we want emotionally healthy sexual relationships. In terms of power and agency, power could be a doctor refusing to honor a person's request for an IUD. An agency could be a young person that makes the decision to find a provider who will provide their preferred method of a contraception. Questions that youth and people may have about their sexual and reproductive health include, how can I access healthcare? What type of birth control should I get? Will I ask my parents for help, or will I do it on my own? What if I get an STI from a partner? And other questions such as, am I normal? You deserve to receive quality sexual health care by providers that understand your needs, as well as someone who you feel comfortable with. The final circle we will discuss is sexual behavior and practices. This includes what people do, think about doing, want, or don't want to do sexually. These behaviors and practices can be used sexually to explore, enact, or express our sexuality. This includes interests, fantasies, aversions, desires, and actions. Also, sex, masturbation, what we do and what we do not want sexually, our likes and dislikes. And this can also include activities and fantasies with a partner or partners, as well as with oneself. Basically, what we do with our own or others' body parts. Maybe use sex toys, and keep in mind that someone may not act upon their desires yet due to a lack of opportunity, ability, fear, etc. Also, sometimes a person's sexual behaviors match their orientation and sometimes they do not. And our last example of how power and agency each play a part in every aspect of sexuality. For sexual behavior and practices, an example of power could be a teen peer educator giving a classmate a reliable resource about what to expect the first time. And an example of agency could be if a teen decides that they are not ready for intercourse and communicates that to their partner. And finally, questions that youth and people may have about their sexual behaviors and practices. What if my partner doesn't have the same interest? You find a way to compromise. What if I want to explore, find pleasure, but I'm not ready to have sex? Just try to be open-minded and creative and in touch with yourself as a sexual being. And think about what you could do with touching or kissing. Some people may question, is it normal to have this type of fantasy and desire? So it's good to ask yourself, what are my sexual desires? A lot of people worry about being normal in these situations. So any fantasy or desire is up to that person, unless it goes against the law. So ask yourself, what are my sexual desires and interests? What do I want from my partner, and what can I give my partner? Now that we've discussed the circles of sexuality and how they all interact with one another, we should have a better understanding of how our experiences may involve two or more aspects of sexuality. As a recap, remember that sexuality lives within us in different ways throughout different phases in our lives. Think of a person deciding to ask someone that they are attracted to on a first date. This includes aspects of intimacy, sexual orientation, and power and agency at play. Power and agency are interconnected within all aspects of your sexuality. You have the power and ability to be in control of your own body and sexual experiences. Also, explore the sexual being that you are while staying safe, especially during the pandemic. Remember that it's just a model. These ideas can be perceived in many different ways, all that stand and perfect. And the final reminder that you can text and email us with any questions and concerns you have about the content in this video or any questions at all. Our contact information will always be in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check us out on social media. Thanks for watching today, and look out for our next video with the Sexperts in our LGBTQ+ series.